I learned so much about myself when I was watching others do their work because I realized how codependent I was and wanting to rescue people and wanting to, shit on them and tell them what they should be doing. And you have to sit back and just watch like you're watching a movie or a play or a, musical or something.
Hey, Shannon.
Hi,
Glad we're back
Chico.
on.
Yep, we are back.
And guess what? We're back today as once again official empty nesters. Our 26-year-old moved out this weekend.
Yes, partially. Yes, he has officially moved out, and but there is still a lot of stuff lingering, and he's trying to decide what he's gonna leave here apparently and what he's gonna take with him, and he can't take everything with him. I get it, but I'm real ready to just get some things organized. And
well, in this weekend, we got back from being in San Antonio. We land. We know he's moved out, and he came by, but he still has stuff here. And it was like we get back. It was a great weekend. We're both kind of tired. Take a nap yesterday afternoon, and it's Sunday. And all of a sudden, you wake up from your nap, and you start getting all his stuff that he's left, and you're like in hyperdrive. I mean, he just moved out and you're in hyperdrive.
Well, yeah, because every time I move a box that's been there for 8 months, which was fine. That's what we agreed to. It's that he could have stuff in boxes. I know he's felt displaced too. But the minute you move those boxes, it's like dust bunnies everywhere. I mean, the stuff hasn't been moved, so it hasn't been dusted or vacuumed. And so it's just a lot for me. And I'm kind of glad you are leaving town this weekend so that I can just have my space and organize it and get it ready and do all that, And I've realized, just like you are ADD, I've known that. And when I lived with you is when I realized how bad it was, because when we got married and we
and you'd put those damn adult ADD books next to my bedside table.
I would, and I would say, will you please just go get tested? Don't listen to me. I was tutoring people with ADD at the time. Like, I knew what was happening, and then you finally went, and then I'm realizing now that I think, so you were an adult, obviously. You were about Travis's age. And I'm realizing that Travis is really ADD, I think. And we're not going to talk about him on the podcast, and I don't mean to talk about him.
But what we are saying is we're back to being empty nesters.
Yes, Yay. Exactly. But I'm glad you're going out of town this weekend, which kind of has to do with what we're going to talk about a little bit.
Yeah, you want to talk about that? Why don't you lead? Where am I going?
Well, so you are going to the leadership, do they call it leadership conference? Men's leadership. It's not even a conference, but at On-Site outside of Nashville, and which you do a lot of work for. I do some work for. I've been to the women's leadership twice, and I've also attended their Living Centered program that we talk about often, and you have too, but you've been to leadership for
16 years.
Yeah, 16 years. So what you do at men's leadership is you go to On-Site, the campus, and other professionals in the mental health space go, and you're in a group, and you do some work there, not work like you're a therapist or you're a counselor or you're whatever. You do your own work. And so what is that?
I like to define, doing the work, in quotes. And so in mental health or in therapy, it's the process that involves dedication, self-awareness, and a willingness to confront challenges that you're facing or you have faced. What doing the work means is to actively engage in one's own healing journey and making consistent efforts, towards better mental health. And so that's what we really mean. It's that consistent effort to make oneself better. And so for the last 16 years, my group, it started. And the reason there's men's leadership and now 70 men from around the country come and get in small groups. Our group is the largest group, and I got invited to it, and it was the first group. And so I got invited to be part of this group because I guess they thought I would do the work, or they thought I needed to do the work.
Well,
probably that.
It's a good experiment in trying to get everybody in a room, even if they're in the profession, to understand the value of it. A lot of people don't see, like, when you do work, like your job that pays you money, that is how your work is valued by a paycheck. So you can see the time that you put in working, and then you get paid. That's the value of working. But it's harder to see the value in working on your mental health, or working on yourself, when you don't know exactly how to do the work. And that's why they call it work, because if life were easy, life is not easy. And I think everyone can, get on board with that. It has its ups and downs, but if it were easy, you wouldn't call it work, but that's why you call it work, but what does that look like? How can you, I know how you can do work when you have a job. You have a job description, you have, assignments, you're sent on an assignment, or you have a task or something like that. So what does it mean to do the work for yourself?
Well, I think if you really look at doing the work, you see that, you'll see that on social media, doing the work. There's a book, written about, hey, you need to do the work on your own self and your own journey and stuff like that. And there's a lot of different components to doing the work. One of the components is like self-reflection. I try, every morning to journal. That's part of doing the work. If there's something I'm wrestling with professionally, personally, with friendship, or just, taking that time of solitude and stuff like that. I had a buddy today that was, sharing about his quiet time, and how, hey, he was wrestling, reading scripture, and he put it in Chat GPT and asked, hey, which one do you think I am? Out of 4 different characters. And it was really cool. He's doing the work. He's gone through a bunch of trials and tribulations the last, 7-8 months. And so it's like cool to see him.
It's so cool to have those tools now to use for good. Like, they say, don't use ChatGPT as a therapist. Well, what does it mean to go to a therapist? Like, what do people visualize when they say going to therapy? Because that's a good way to do your work. That's a good
That's one of the ways of doing the work. You have self-reflection, kind of journaling, mindfulness, but then therapeutic engagement, getting with a therapist, committing to the sessions helps maintain helps you maintain momentum in addressing any issues that are coming up.
I'm talking about, what do you think the majority of people out there think of when they think of therapy? I know what I think of when I think of, oh, are you going to therapy? I know what I think of.
Well, they think of really only one style of therapy. Only
Right.
one thing of therapy.
And what is that style of therapy?
That's usually talk therapy.
Right. So for those people out there listening that are thinking, okay, what do I think about therapy? What do I think about? I think about going to an office, like ringing a doorbell and someone saying, "We'll be right with you," and being in a little waiting room, and then somebody coming out and saying, "Okay, we're ready to see you," and you have 1 hour a week usually, and you talk to and you think of shows like Shrinking or,
Yes.
whatever.
And if you're an older audience, Bob
Yeah.
Newhart, you know,
Yes. Yes.
uh,
And so you think when people say you really should do the work, you might need to go to therapy. There are a lot of people out there that might think that that sounds like a heavy load and like a stretch. Like they don't have the time, the money, the wherewithal to find the right therapist. And then you really don't want to waste your time or your money if you end up with somebody that's not a fit. And so I think a lot of people can be like, it's too hard. I don't want to do the work and everything else. But there are so many other styles and types of.
well, but let's first keep going down this rabbit hole
Okay.
of talk therapy or, stuff like that is like, yes, people might have those reservations. I agree with you all the time. But people also might get into, your typical, hey, I'm seeing a therapist, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of benefits, to talk therapy. It provides that safe place for clients, or the person to express themselves. You can, as a therapist, you can tailor, the needs for that individual and their preferences, but there are limitations.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of your job. So I'm clearly not dogging talk
No,
therapy because you do that and,
but
it's great.
but the deal is, as a therapist, I always look at the individual and go, okay, hey, can I provide, what they need? They might need some deeper work, and it might not
Right.
just be on that talk therapy, because there is, some limitations. Progress may be slow and require a long-term commitment, and really the effectiveness really will depend significantly on the relationship you have with your therapist. If
Right.
so, it's kind of
And
the same
and a
things.
therapist that's willing to uh let you grow in your work. It's letting you move between different types of therapy and things like that. It's like I had a coaching client one time that said, I just really want coaching right now. And I said, "Well, why?" And she said, "Well, I have a therapist that has walked me through some things that I needed therapy on, but I was finding that I was obsessing in my mind about what I was going to talk to my therapist with that 1 hour. I was just trying to like condense it all and I was having to like go to my notes every time I was thinking about something that I wanted to mention. And I compared it to when you go to the doctor, like for your annual exam, um, you have you think all year, oh, I'm going to have them check this mole, or I'm going to have it like you think of this list of things that you want to discuss with
And
your
what you're
doctor.
supposed to do is ask him to check a mole.
Oh my God. Yes. Yes.
You check
By
my
the way,
moles, and
did you
then you,
do that on the side of your neck?
yeah,
What'd they say? I'm
they
just curious. We're going
they
to,
said to call that dermatologist.
oh my gosh. You didn't even
Yes.
tell me that.
Yeah.
See, this is what I'm talking about. Like, and you might forget, you might realize that you have this mole that needs to be checked in February and not have your annual until May. And then you've forgotten. And then you come home and you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot about the mole. And so the same can happen with therapy if you're like going throughout your week and you're like, oh, I really got to address this with my therapist. But so that's why she wanted to do some coaching for a while, because she wanted to really hone in on doing the work so that she could really, sharpen her
And that's why
communication skills and everything else like that.
I'm
Yeah.
glad you brought that up, because there is you can do work if you're being coached as well. The difference is with mental health or depression or, understanding yourself and pursuing healing. That's more in doing the work in a therapeutic mindset with some
You
different
can sometimes
ways.
get more work done coaching,
Yes.
I mean, a
And
little bit
so,
more. Yeah. Does that make sense?
yes. And so, but coaching isn't going to be a lot of emotional processing. It's going to be more skill development, maybe more behavior changes and stuff like that, and a commitment to growth. That's going to be more of that. But so you have talk therapy, but then there's a lot of different modalities, and we're not going to unpack all the different modalities of therapy, but we are going to discuss,
No, but
several.
I didn't realize that there were really, I knew, because I had studied, I knew that there were different modalities of work, but I had never done them myself until I went to onsite. And then I got to participate in the different modalities, and it changed my life. And I think that's why people always say, and this doesn't just have to happen at onsite. This just onsite happens to be who we have uh, knowledge of and experience with. And so it can be done many other places, but that's why I feel like going to onsite and doing that work is cramming years of work into days. And it just fast forward. It's like a fast forward.
Well, like what I said, one of the limitations in talk therapy, it can be a long, slow process. And so
Right.
doing some of these other modalities, like it on site, other places use it too, but we do like on site, but is like psychodrama.
Right.
And what is psychodrama, and what does that mean when someone says psychodrama?
Right. And it's so funny because just an interjection, and then I want you to talk about it because you've done it before as a client and as a guide. But it when you first talked about it, I could not wrap my head around it just because the name is a little like psycho and drama. You don't really want either of those in your life. So it's hard. You don't want a psycho and you don't want drama. And then we had Mary
And do you
on our
remember Mary?
podcast like 5 years ago.
Remember
And
what she said about psychodrama?
no,
Can
what
you?
did she say? I can't
She,
remember, but
I'll tell you, she was doing a couples, this married couple that have been married a long time, and the wife goes, "Okay, you're a psychodrama, it's psychodrama's therapy," and the husband goes, "Okay, I know what psychodrama is." Before Mary could respond, I'm the psycho, and she's the
it's the
drama.
drama. Yeah. Right. That's kind of what you think of. And it's hard to wrap your head around. Like, I don't want to do any psychodrama. Like, that sounds, but get over the name. Maybe they need to rename it. But what do you
Well, it's a
think about?
therapeutic approach that uses guided drama, and role playing to
So what's
explore.
drama though? What's drama? Like theater?
Kind of
Like a
it
play?
comes from kind of that. It's like to act out whatever is holding you back.
So dramatic, when they say on TV, they're like, this isn't real time. This is what do they call it? A dramatic
Reenactment.
reenactment. So that's kind
Yes.
of what it is. It's not drama, like, oh my gosh, your drama.
No, it's
It's
more
like
like,
a dramatic reenactment.
yeah, a dramatic reenactment. It's a guided dramatic reenactment or
Okay.
role playing to explore and address emotional issues.
Right. And what does the psycho stand for? It's really just psychological.
Exactly.
It's like a psychological
Logical,
dramatic reenactment.
reenactment. Yes.
And they just shortened it to psychodrama, which sounds
Reenactment or role playing or something that participants, they'll act out scenarios to gain insight into their feelings and behaviors.
okay. And so that could sound to people that have things like stage fright or don't like to speak in public, or public speaking, fears, things like that, could automatically be shut down to this. But it's not that. That's why you have a guide
God.
or a therapist to guide you through the psychodrama. It's
But at the same
right.
time, that is one of the limitations is like, man, you got to really know the client and the audience is like, it may not be suitable for some individuals uncomfortable with, role playing or public performance,
Right.
but the deal is
Because it
like,
requires a little bit of a group, because you need people to kind of stand in for certain characters, quote unquote, or whatever. So you need actual, bodies to stand in, even though it's you doing the work of this dramatic reenactment, but
well,
guided.
the coolest part, the benefits, it encourages this emotional expression and catharsis, you know. But the coolest part is it for you if you are in the psychodrama, if you're the protagonist, or the one that you're doing the drama, it'll enhance empathy on your part and allow the participant or participants to see the situation, whatever you're wrestling with, from a completely different perspective.
Right. And then watching other people do it and participate in it, I learned so much about myself when I was watching others do their work, because I realized how codependent I was and wanting to rescue people and wanting to, shit on them and tell them what they should be doing. And you have to sit back and just watch, like you're watching a movie or a play or a, musical or
And
something.
what's happening is you want it to be in a really safe environment. So, a really good guide will create this safety. And what they'll say in that group room with other people, they'll talk about this being a container. And so you'll come up with rules, of
Right.
what's in the container. And so the person, when you talk about, man, my
That's why
codependency.
you want to do it in a therapeutic setting instead of just trying to come up with it on your own?
Yeah. And so it's like you want to make sure because sometimes these psychodramas can become very intense. Like people might need to scream out and yell and actually
Right.
actually use props to really illustrate what's happening. I've done the same thing you've done. I'll be doing some psychodramas with the men in my group, starting this weekend. You know,
Yeah.
up at onsite. And so we unpack things or issues or struggles or, old messages that are going on internally and really get a different perspective. So psychodrama is really good for people that have had trauma or a lot of wounds in their life.
Right. And then they can really try to start to expand and do the work that's required once they realize and access those parts of themselves that they may not have really realized existed. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
The concerns or the fears or anything like that. So I think that's good.
I think it's really good. So there's other things,
Should we?
and so at onsite, you'll also, if you go and do the program that Shannon and I were both talking about, the Living Center program, you'll do a psychodrama. You might do this. What you'll do is family sculpting. You can do family sculpting. It comes from the family therapist. Family therapy model is if you're with your family, you might work with your family in a sculpt. And what you'll be in the room with everybody that's in your family. And you might have
And
someone
so even that terminology kind of makes you think of, when I think of sculpting, I think of working with my hands,
like clay or something.
like clay or something or anything. I mean, bronze sculptures, like you think of working with your hands, but it's not really that. So kind of you're about to go into it, but so talking about in a family therapy session, where it's maybe parents and children.
Yeah, but it is kind of what you're saying, Shannon. It is creating a sculpture. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
And so it's used in family therapy where families, members can create a physical representation of the relationships to sculpt it out.
Okay,
You
so
have
it is
people
a
pause.
physical representation. So
Yes.
what do you do with them?
So what you'll do is the family members will position themselves or objects to depict, their feelings about relationships or dynamics.
Meaning
know,
like closeness or
yeah, like closeness or farness. It's like I've done a lot of sculpting, especially when you and I had Gaston House or Casa, and we would have the family members there for the family program, and we would get a family up and go, okay, in this room, in relationship to you, you're the drug addict. Where was your dad? And sometimes I've had people put their dad outside the room and shut the door.
yeah,
They might have the mom like over coddling him.
right.
Where were your siblings? And they might be over here or over there. There might be, a grandparent that is living in the house. Where are they? So they get this visual picture, this sculpture of how the system was functioning as it related to the addiction. Or, you might
Yeah.
have that. So it's a really cool visual to do, but you can also do a family sculpt when you're in your group at onsite. You'll do a family sculpt, and people will step in and play your mother, your father, your siblings. Someone might
Right.
play. Yeah, you've heard about inner child work. Someone might play the younger version of you, and you set the sculpture up of how what you remember. For me, it was like that 8-year-old little boy.
Right. And I've done that before where you have somebody, playing yourself at well, I mean the guide or the therapist will when we say guide, that's what they call them at onsite, but they're licensed therapists.
Yes.
But they guide you through all these exercises, and they will let you choose how many maybe even how many ages you want to hit, I mean, like I had a person in my group that did like 8, 12, 15, like ages. Like she had everybody in the room representing something, an age. And it made sense once she was doing the family sculpt why she wanted to address that. But I think that kind of work is the difference between like what they talk about now, like get in touch with your inner child, or all that kind of stuff. It's more of a understanding how as an adult you would treat a child that age going through with whatever they were going through at that particular age, and building an empathy for that child that happens
For that's
to be
part of you. That's part of you.
Right.
Yeah. And so for
Right.
me, it's like, and my biological dad's been dead since 1979,
Right.
And so when I did my family sculpt, it was 1977. My aunt passed away in a car accident, and my mom and my brothers and my cousins were all in the house. And my dad brought me into his study. I'm the oldest. And so there was that 8-year-old little boy, and he told me, Chico. And so I did this sculpt, and I remember that 8-year-old little boy. He said, Chico. And it's not blaming, it's just naming.
Right.
Okay. Hey, get all your crying out now, because when you leave this room, you cannot cry again. You have to be strong for your mother and your brother and your cousins.
Well, he was saying what was needed right at that moment. Like it was all crisis. There was a lot going on, and he was saying what he thought to be, helpful at that time. And he also was saying what he thought you could handle at the time, right?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No.
I think there's some truth to what you were saying. It wasn't, he was the oldest of 6 boys. At the time, I was oldest of 3 boys. He was just doing what he was modeled.
Well,
that
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
That I, as an 8-year-old little boy, needed to be strong, and,
Right.
he,
Okay. Hang on. Sorry. What I'm getting at is that he died 2 years later
yes,
at the age of 30, right?
31.
31. So that is just showing us how we can, I don't even want to say make mistakes without even.
I believe his intentions were good. Okay. I'm not
Right.
questioning his intentions. He wasn't being mean. It wasn't vicious. But for an 8-year-old to process that,
Yeah.
it wasn't healthy.
Right.
He didn't know any better. So I'm not questioning his intent, but I'm questioning the approach. And so
And
what that imprinted on this man who's 57 now as an 8-year-old, man, was
But that's what
powerful.
I'm saying. That is what inner child work is. That's what it is that for you to be able to go back in time and say, without blaming, because the intention was fine and it led to, since he died 2 years later, you had the messaging that you needed to take care of your whole family and you were 10 years old. So that's why doing the inner child work is so important, because you now have the wherewithal to go back and say, I wasn't responsible for that. I I don't have to be responsible for that. And you can start to repair those messages that may even come up now in different circumstances.
Mm-hmm. So you're correct. Where I was saying is like,
Yes, sorry.
that's that family sculpt is like, all of a sudden I got to see that, hey, that 8-year-old Chico didn't have the tools on really understanding the ask.
Right.
I didn't understand the ask. And it's not to blame, the messenger of the ask. It's just to recognize that, hey, he was in his 20s.
Right.
He had a wife that was hysterical. He had these 3
Right.
other kids. He had these 2 little kids that my aunts and uncle were divorced. He was living in Houston. So there was all this. He came in and became the fixer, and hey, Chico needs to help me out here,
Right.
which is way too big for an 8-year-old. But that 8-year-old played out. So that sculpt gave me that picture to see, hey, that wasn't a good scenario right there. That wasn't
Right.
real healthy.
Exactly. And so,
So that's another form. Another form is what you hear is called EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
yeah.
And this is used, primarily with trauma, PTSD, but it also can help with anxiety, depression, and phobias. The benefits, it leads to rapid processing of traumatic, memories.
And then, so tell people what they could expect when they walk into um, someone that's going to do some EMDR on them, and what they can expect.
What they can expect, it's
Because you've done it. I've never done
yeah,
it.
it's a treatment designed to alleviate distress and associated with traumatic memories.
I know, but
it
how?
helps you. It helps you recall distressing events while undergoing, this stimulation through guided eye movements.
But how do I go and I sit down in a chair. And what is there a prompt given or
Yeah, I haven't actually done EMDR.
Oh, you haven't. You did brain
I
spotting.
I did brain spotting
Oh, yeah.
that's similar to EMDR.
Oh, sorry. Well, I know people that have done EMDR and they love it, and they say that you can really rewire the pathways of like what triggers you, what brings up
emotional pain you have,
Yes.
all sorts of stuff. And it addresses those traumatic memories, reducing their emotional charge. So it kind of takes away the power of that emotional charge. But the cool part about EMDR and brain spotting, you don't it doesn't require extensive verbal recounting of the trauma.
Right.
You know,
Okay. So that's what I was going to say is that when people think, oh my gosh, if you're going to rewire, the pathways to my nervous system and the brain, the nervous system and the brain connecting and everything else, am I going to have to really like relive this trauma? And I think that that's where it's awesome because you don't have to relive the trauma, but it
but
it
it
helps.
it has this incredible ability, that and brain spotting, for profound emotional releases and insight.
Yeah. Because when people don't do something like that, they can, their traumatic events and stuff can hit them out of nowhere. There can be, there can not even be a trigger present. You know what I'm saying? It can just happen at any time. It's kind of like, veterans and post traumatic stress.
Yeah, they use it a lot with PTSD.
Right. And
And so
so,
they're still stuck up in the head, and they're having, just these intrusive thoughts that keep them stuck there. And so the EMDR, through this eye movement desensitization, goes to the part of the brain that it's affecting, and there's just kind of a release.
yes, and
Yeah.
it's a different modality. It's hard work. You're apparently people are exhausted
Yeah.
after they do a session. They're not even talking through anything or whatever. They're just doing it, and then it's tiring for the brain. So you're doing work. You know what I mean? We're
Yeah.
talking about doing the work, so you're doing it.
Yeah, so it's cool. And then if you think there, there's another modality that's kind of, I don't want to even say it's similar, but kind of, it's called neurofeedback. And what that
Right.
is, it's a biofeedback treatment, that uses real-time displays of brain activity to teach self-regulation of brain function. And if you're a client, uh, you receive this feedback through visual or auditory signals, when you're engaging in tasks that promote brainwave changes to improve what is the hope is it improves mental health symptoms by training. It's kind of just like working out your body, because the brain is,
A
a
muscle.
muscle.
Yeah.
It's training the brain to function more optimally.
Right. Right.
So it's cool, and you'll see it a lot with ADHD, anxiety, depression, PTSD, and it helps the person that's doing neurofeedback to take an active role in their mental health.
Right. Right.
I'm just glad now. I just
Yeah.
want to go. There's so much when you talk about doing the work. There's so many different modalities and
Right.
different ways to go about doing the work. And so when people think about, hey, I'm just, doing the work, or you need to do the work, it's like, man, how do I get to a place of, if there's things that are, I'm just stuck, or like what we talked about, some big, traumatic events in your life. But it doesn't have to be any of those things. But if you're in this cycle of, kind of the definition of insanity is, doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results.
Right.
It's like, if you go in and do some work, you can change that. You can also change the way your brain,
Right.
functions.
Right. And there's all this, as research on the brain and everything is picked up, it's it's still a mystery. The brain is a mystery, and there are a lot of questions about how it, actually works and everything. But there's a whole lot more information about the brain lately, right? I
Yes.
mean, there's been research. There's a whole lot more that we know about the
Well, I
brain,
mean,
and
back when we were growing up, and, in junior high and high school, and Nancy Reagan's whole deal,
this
just
is the
say
brain.
no.
This is
This
your
is
brain
your
on
brain on,
drugs.
yes, and they drop an egg in and fry it,
Right,
and
egg, yes.
you're killing brain cells when you're using drugs. Your brain will never heal. That science has been debunked. Your
Right,
brain can heal.
right.
It can do those things. And so that's that. Don't get caught up that, hey, your brain can't heal. You can change. And so it's like what we're trying to say today is there's a lot of different modalities. Get curious. Don't just assume that the only therapy, if you've tried the talk therapy, the CBT route, and you still are feeling stuck, there might be some other therapeutic modalities that you could use and do some deeper work. And you might be stuck in needing to do deeper work. But a lot of people, what happens is I like the phrase doing the work,
Yeah,
because I want to do the work to heal. That's why I'm going to on-site, and I've been going for so long with these other men. It's like
right.
they are safe for me. They are my guys, and we go in and we do the work and transitioned in all phases of life
Well,
when
and
I
there's
think about it.
always something to work on. I mean, always.
Yes.
So,
you
yeah,
know and so I got a
it's
buddy
good.
that lost his wife 6 months ago, and he's in his 70s, and I'm sure he's going to do some work over, and his wife was older, but he's going to do some work around that. And so there's all sorts of stuff that is happening there.
Yes, yes. I'm glad you're going to go do some work. I could give you some topics to do some work on if you need.
Well, luckily this episode will come out when I'm back,
Yeah,
so
talk
you can
about the work you did.
okay, throw out some topics.
No, I'm kidding. I don't know.
uh,
I don't. I mean, I can. I'll think of it later. I don't need to throw it out right here. But
okay.
you know, I mean, I think every wife would want their husband to do some work.
And every husband would want his wife to do some work.
Yeah, I work all the time. I do lots of work. Okay. All right. So our dog is going nuts. What is his problem? Anyway, we're going to wrap up. How about that?
I like it. I'll see you.
Okay. See ya.